Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books. And today I'm reviewing a all sorts of books book, and that is Earthly Joys by Philippa Gregory. If you are not familiar with Philippa Gregory, she has written a ton of books, like over 20. She is most well known for The Other Boleyn Girl. Most of her stories are historical fiction, and a lot of them cover Tudor-era England. So think Henry VIII and his wives, the Plantagenets, even living in 1800s England. And the reason why I love Philippa Gregory, I think I've read 90% of her books at this point, is she does such a good job of bringing these time periods to life and really gets you to feel like what it would be like to live during that time. Most of her stories are usually from the female perspective, so Anne Boleyn, Catherine of Aragon. However, this book, surprisingly, actually features a male character. He's the central male in this story, and I was really excited to see like how she would tackle this point of view. So the setup of the story is we have a man, his name is John Transcendent, and he is a gardener, and this is in like 1800s England. He is a gardener for a lord who is pretty well known in England at that time. He's a favorite of the king, and he has a very close relationship with his lord. They're basically best friends, and he's really a confidant, and he would do anything and everything for his lord. You know, John is really one of those characters that believes in like, you know, I love my country, I love my king, and everything I do is to serve those two things. Serve my country, serve his king. He's very content with his place in life. And I think ultimately, like, he just wants to be, I guess, recognized for his service. He's an amazing gardener. He's very well known throughout England for being able to not only like plant these amazing gardens, but he does all this cool stuff. I don't know a lot about gardening, but if you do, that part of the book might interest you. Now, this is one of Philippa Gregory's earlier books. It was published in the late 90s, so it's definitely not one of her more popular or well-known ones, but again, because I've read like almost everything else she's ever written, I wanted to read this one too. And honestly, I was interested in the story. I was interested to see, like I said, how she would kind of tackle this male perspective. And I do think that John, his character, makes for an interesting character study. And that is really what this book is about. This book is a character study on this one man's life, on his life as a gardener, on what it means to him to be a gardener for a lord. It goes through the process of him finding a wife, getting married, building a family, and then the lord that he is working for passes away, so then he ends up working for a different lord, and the new lord he ends up working for, the Duke of Buckingham, is like a completely different character than his first one. His first lord that he worked for was very much like an older man. He was very like well-versed in the court and courtly intrigue and all that stuff. He knew his place, he knew his role. But this new lord that comes in, Buckingham, he's very young, he's like an upstart, he's very frivolous, he's flirty, he's very charismatic where everyone loves him. But again, he is very frivolous. So John kind of finds himself in this interesting position where he's working for a lord who he loves, but doesn't quite agree with all the things that he's doing, all the things that he does. And this is kind of like the main conflict of this book. Or what I should say is that's like the only conflict of this book. Because here's the thing. This book is over 500 pages long, and not a lot happens in it. Like, not a lot happens in it. It is very, very slow. It is a very slow burn. And normally, Gregory's books, if you've read any of the other ones, like The Other Boleyn Girl, like I mentioned, her books are filled with drama, they're filled with romance, they're filled with so much stuff, and I feel like that is missing from this book. Maybe it's because, it's an earlier book and she developed more as a writer afterwards. But if you are someone that's really into like really deep character studies, then you might like this one more than me. And again, that's not to say the book isn't without its good qualities. So I'll tell you some of the things that I liked about the book, and then I'll tell you some of the things that I disliked about the book, and maybe that'll help you decide if Earthly Joys is something that you want to read. So let's start with the positive first. The good things about this book. Number one, John himself and all the rest of the characters in this book. Philippa Gregory does a fantastic job bringing all of these characters to life. If you are someone that likes good character development, like you need strong characters for a story, this book definitely has that. All of the characters you get to know very, very, very intimately, especially John, but even the characters around him, like his wife, the other lords, his son, you get to know everything about them. You spend so much time with them in this book. You get to know all of the intimate details about their lives, their hopes and dreams, what they believe in, what they want out of life, who they love, who they hate, who they want to fight, what they want to protect. You really get to know all of these characters on a very personal level. I'm someone who loves strong characters and good character development, so that was definitely a plus for this book. Number two, I would say the setting. The time period that this book is set in. I think, again, Philippa does a really good job, like, making you feel what it would be like to live in this time period. This is something that she does well in all of her books. But in these various time periods, like, when you really think back to, what was going on in history at that time. Think about the religions that were in power. Think about the rules and the roles people had to play. Most of her books are about women and the roles that women play and how, they were seen as less than a lot of times during history. And so what they had to do to like overcome that and get what they want out of life is usually really interesting. But in this case, because it's about a man, it's a little bit different. However, there are female characters in this story. Like I said, he does have a wife. And I think his relationship with his wife is definitely probably the most interesting relationship in this book. Because of the way that John is so dedicated to being a servant, so dedicated to his country, so dedicated to his king, his wife at times kind of takes second place to that. And his wife struggles with that because she wants to be number one in his heart and in his mind. And for a lot of the time, she's just not. So, for example, John travels a lot throughout the story. He goes to all of these various locations. Sometimes it's because he's trying to find a specific tree, or at one time he goes to Belgium for tulips. He's always traveling abroad to look for things for his garden. And it's usually not because he woke up one day and was like, hey, I'm gonna leave my family for 3 months to look for flowers. It's because one of the lords that he's working for is specifically asking him, requesting him, hey, I want you to do this for me. And John never says no. That's the thing about him. He never says no to his king. He never says no to his lords. The only person he says no to in his life is his wife, which is a really interesting dynamic, The other character that I want to mention is Buckingham. So the lord that he kind of works for through the second half of the book. And this is where, like, if there's any sort of what you would consider drama, it happens in the second half of the book with Buckingham. Because, like I said, Buckingham is young and he's charismatic and he flirts with everything. Like, John really falls in love with him, but falls in love with him in a different way that he is in love with his wife. And at first, I had really high hopes for where this relationship was going to go. And a lot of Philippa Gregory's other books, she does a really good job with romance. I think she puts in just the right amount of steam to make it like really seductive, but never crosses the line into vulgarity. So that is one thing that I was expecting on this book that I'm kind of going to have to put on the negative side, and here's why. On the back of this book, in the description, it says the following: every certainty upon which Transcendent has based his life, his love of his wife, his children, his passion for work, his loyalty to his country, is shattered as he follows Buckingham to court, to war, and to the forbidden territories of human love. Now, when I read that, what I thought was going to happen is that he was going to have an affair with Buckingham. That he was going to have an affair, and it was going to be this whole thing, because here's the thing, in that time period in England, like, everyone was having affairs with each other, especially the people that were, like, in the court. You know, the king has all these mistresses. So I thought it was going to be a really interesting story for a man, a gardener, to have an affair with another man, the Duke of Buckingham. And that is not what I got. It is technically in there. However, there is one scene only. There's one scene where they, quote unquote, have an affair. It is very brief, and then it's over, and it never happens again. So it's not like an ongoing affair. It's just a one-time thing. So if you were looking for a steamy, gay romance, that is not what this is at all. However, the moment that they do share together, it does change John. It does change him. It does shake his beliefs, because he really loves Buckingham and he thinks that all these things are going to happen for him. But at the end of the day, Buckingham is a selfish character and he really only thinks about himself, and John is just a gardener. So that's something that I kind of have to put on the negative list. Again, like I mentioned before, the plot, it's way too long, I think. It's pretty boring for the most part. There's not a lot of steam. And then the other thing, kind of circling back to being too long, once we get about 75% through the book, there are multiple places where I thought the book was going to end. I thought the book was going to end, the story was going to end, because it seemed like the perfect spot to end it. However, the story kept going. Like, this happened multiple times. And if you've ever seen, the third Lord of the Rings movie, you know how it has like multiple endings? That's exactly what happened in this book. I can't say why without going into spoiler territory, but let's just say that there were multiple places where this book could have been ended and wrapped up, and it kept going. So I do think that this book could have used more editing. I think Philippa Gregory's later works are much tighter in that regard. So just to wrap this up, because I know I've been rambling for a while, the things I liked: strong character development and really great view into the history of this time period. The things I didn't like: it didn't meet my expectations in terms of the plot. It was way too long. It's quite boring for the most part, and it has way too many endings. So unfortunately, the negative did outweigh the positive here. There's actually a sequel to this book called Virgin Earth, and I don't even understand how this book could have a sequel based on the way it ended. But we'll see. I am going to read the sequel at some point because I've read everything else Philippa Gregory has read, so I can't just leave that one off. However, I'm going to take a very long break. Like, I may not even read it till next year or something, because this one was a bit of a chore to get through. I'm glad I read it, but it's not something that I'm personally going to reread. And again, if you're looking for historical fiction, if you're interested in Philippa Gregory, I can definitely recommend many other books that I think are more enjoyable. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you are rewarded with a Meepers. Say hello, Meepers. I know you were sleeping, but you're a good baby. Thank you so much for being such a cute little girl. Anywho, that is my review on Earthly Joys by Philippa Gregory. As always, if you've read this book, let me know in the comments section below what you thought about it. If you've read any Philippa Gregory books, let me know what your favorites are. And of course, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me and the critters out. And I'll be back soon with more bookish videos. All right, everyone, happy reading.